From streets to prison, the brutal crime life of Baltimore. A city caught between hope and violence. When most people think about Baltimore, they picture two very different cities. One city appears on postcards and travel websites. It is the city of historic neighborhoods, busy waterfronts, sports stadiums, and families enjoying a day in the harbor. It is a city filled with history, culture, and people who work hard every day to build better lives for themselves and their children. But there is another Baltimore. A Baltimore that rarely appears in tourism advertisements. A Baltimore where abandoned buildings stand like silent reminders of better days. Where police sirens are so common that many residents barely look up when they hear them. Where some children grow up learning which streets to avoid long before they learn how to drive. This documentary is not about judging an entire city. Because Baltimore is not a city of criminals. Far from it. Millions of people have lived honest lives here. Families have raised children here. Teachers have educated students here. Business owners have opened their doors every morning hoping to create opportunities for others. But this story is about something that has affected Baltimore for generations. The cycle that pulls some young people from the streets into the criminal justice system. And for many, eventually into prison. To understand how that happens, we have to go back in time. Long before Baltimore became known for crime statistics and headlines about violence, it was one of America's most important industrial cities. Factories provided jobs. Shipyards employed thousands of workers. Entire neighborhoods were built around industries that gave people stable incomes and a sense of purpose. For many families, the future seemed predictable. Parents worked. Children went to school. Life was not always easy, but there was a path forward. Then things began to change. Over time, many factories closed. Jobs disappeared. Companies moved elsewhere. The economic foundation that had supported entire communities started to weaken. The effects were not immediate, but slowly, year after year, some neighborhoods found themselves struggling more than before. When stable jobs become harder to find, other opportunities often begin to fill the empty space. And in some parts of Baltimore, that opportunity came in the form of illegal drug markets. What started on a few street corners eventually became something much larger. For some young people growing up in these neighborhoods, the drug trade looked attractive from a distance. It appeared to offer things that seemed difficult to find elsewhere. Money, respect, status, a feeling of belonging. Many teenagers saw older individuals driving expensive cars or wearing expensive clothes. They saw people who appeared successful, even if that success came from illegal activity. What they rarely saw was the full picture. They did not see the prison sentences. They did not see the years spent behind bars. They did not see the families waiting for loved ones to come home. And they did not see the lives permanently changed by a single decision. That is one of the most important things to understand about street life. The beginning and the ending often look completely different. At the beginning, everything can appear exciting. Fast money, tension, influence. But the ending is often much harder. For many people, it ends in prison. For others, it ends in tragedy. And for families left behind, the consequences can last forever. As Baltimore entered the late 20th century, violence became a growing concern in some neighborhoods. Not everywhere, not every block, not every family, but enough that residents began feeling its impact. Community leaders spoke about it. Police departments struggled to address it. Parents worried about it. And children grew up surrounded by it. Imagine being 10 years old and seeing police officers respond to incidents in your neighborhood regularly. Imagine hearing adults talk about violence as though it were part of everyday life. Imagine watching older teenagers become involved in dangerous activities and believing that was simply how the world worked. For some children, that environment became normal. And when something becomes normal, it becomes easier to accept. That is how cycles continue. One generation watches another. Young people imitate older people. Bad decisions become habits. And habits become lifestyles. Of course, not everyone follows that path. In fact, most do not. Many young people in Baltimore overcome enormous obstacles and build successful lives. They graduate. They find careers. They support their families. They become examples for others. But this story focuses on those who take a different road. The road that begins on the streets and often ends behind bars. Because prisons across America are filled with people who once believed they would never end up there. Almost nobody grows up dreaming about prison. Children dream about becoming athletes, musicians, business owners, doctors, teachers. Very few children imagine spending years staring at concrete walls and steel doors. Yet every year, countless people enter correctional facilities across the country. Many of them started with small decisions. A bad influence, a quick way to make money, a choice made in a moment without thinking about the future. One decision becomes another, then another, until eventually the consequences catch up. That pattern has repeated itself countless times in Baltimore. And it is why so many community leaders have spent years trying to break the cycle before it starts. Because once someone enters the criminal justice system, the road back can become much harder. Opportunities shrink. Trust becomes difficult to rebuild. And the label of having a criminal record can follow someone for years. But before prison comes something else. The streets. The environment where many of these stories begin. And in Baltimore, some of those streets have witnessed decades of struggles involving poverty, drugs, violence, and survival. To people who have never lived there, those neighborhoods can seem impossible to understand. But for the people who call them home, they are simply where life happens. Children ride bicycles. Families gather on porches. Neighbors know one another. Life continues even in difficult circumstances. That is why Baltimore's story is more complicated than many people realize. It is not simply a story about crime. It is a story about people. People making choices. People facing obstacles. People trying to survive. And sometimes people making decisions they later regret. Because every prison sentence starts somewhere. Every inmate has a first day, a first mistake, a first bad decision. A first moment when life begins moving in the wrong direction. And in Baltimore, many of those stories begin on streets where hope and danger have existed side by side for generations. The question is not how someone ends up in prison overnight. That almost never happens. The real question is how thousands of small choices, made over months or years, slowly lead someone there. And that is where our story truly begins. The streets that shaped a generation. To understand how some people in Baltimore end up in prison, you first have to understand the streets where many of them grew up. For many young people, the neighborhood around them becomes their first classroom. Before they learn about the world through television or the internet, they learn it by watching the people around them. They watch how adults make money. They watch who gets respect. They watch who people fear. And they watch who seems successful. In some Baltimore neighborhoods, children grew up seeing two very different paths. One path was slow and difficult. It involved school, hard work, and patience. The other path appeared much faster. Money could be earned quickly. Status could be gained quickly. Respect seemed easier to achieve. At least that is how it looked from the outside. What many young people did not see was the price attached to that lifestyle. They saw the money, but not the prison cell. They saw the expensive clothes, but not the courtrooms. They saw the attention, but not the funerals. That is one of the oldest illusions in street culture. The rewards are visible. The consequences are hidden until it is too late. Many former inmates have described a similar story. It rarely begins with a major crime. Instead, it starts with small decisions. Spending time with the wrong people, skipping school, looking for quick money, wanting acceptance from a group that appears powerful. The decisions seem small at first, but small decisions have a way of becoming larger ones. And before long, some young people find themselves trapped in a life they never expected. The truth is that nobody is born wanting to spend years in prison. Most people start with dreams. The problem is that dreams become harder to follow when opportunities seem far away and shortcuts seem close. And in some parts of Baltimore, those shortcuts were waiting on almost every corner. The drug trade. By the 1980s and 1990s, Baltimore was facing challenges that many American cities were struggling with. Illegal drug markets were expanding. Violence was increasing in some neighborhoods, and law enforcement agencies were trying to keep up with a problem that seemed to grow larger every year. The drug trade changed entire communities. For some people, it became a source of income. For others, it became a source of fear. And for many families, it became a source of heartbreak. The reality of the drug trade is often very different from the image presented on the streets. From a distance, it can look profitable, but beneath the surface, it is built on risk. Arrests, violence, constant fear, and the possibility that everything can disappear overnight. Many individuals entered the trade believing they would make money and leave quickly. Very few actually did. Instead, they became trapped in a cycle that was difficult to escape. As law enforcement increased investigations, more arrests followed. Courtrooms became crowded with cases connected to drugs, weapons, and organized criminal activity. For many defendants, the outcome was predictable. Conviction, sentencing, prison. The streets that once seemed full of opportunity suddenly led somewhere else entirely. Prison cell. And for many families, that prison sentence affected far more than the person behind bars. Parents suffered. Children suffered. Entire households struggled with the absence of a loved one. The consequences spread far beyond the courtroom. That is something crime statistics rarely show. Behind every arrest is a family. Behind every sentence is a story. And behind every story is a chain of decisions that led to that moment. The road to prison, families left behind, and the future. As arrests increased, Baltimore became part of a larger national conversation about crime and punishment. Politicians promised tougher laws. Courts handed down longer sentences. Prisons expanded. Many people believed strict punishment would solve the problem, but the reality proved more complicated. While some dangerous individuals were removed from the streets, new young people often stepped into the same roles. The cycle continued. One generation entered prison. Another generation grew up watching it happen. That cycle created deep scars in some communities. Children grew up with parents behind bars. Families struggled financially. Entire neighborhoods became familiar with court dates, prison visits, and the emotional weight of incarceration. For many mothers, the experience was heartbreaking. They remembered holding their children as babies and never imagined one day visiting them through prison glass. Many fathers carried the burden of wondering whether they could have changed the outcome. Brothers and sisters watched family members disappear into a system that often felt impossible to escape. And yet, despite these challenges, Baltimore's story is not only about crime. It is also about resilience. Community leaders have spent decades working to break the cycle. Teachers have stayed after school to mentor students. Faith leaders have opened their doors to young people looking for guidance. Former inmates have shared their stories in hopes of preventing others from making the same mistakes. Their message is often simple. The street life promises much more than it delivers. Promises money but often leads to prison. Promises respect but often creates fear. Promises power but frequently ends in loss. Many former inmates describe prison as a place where they finally had time to think about the decisions that brought them there. Some used that time to change. Others struggled to let go of the past. But almost all of them shared one thing in common. They wished they could go back and make different choices. That may be the most important lesson in Baltimore's story. Crime is rarely one decision. It is usually many decisions made over time. One shortcut, one bad influence, one choice that seems harmless, then another, and another, until eventually the consequences arrive. The story of Baltimore is not a story about a city that failed. It is a story about a city that continues to fight against difficult challenges. Millions of people who live there are not criminals. They are workers, students, parents, and neighbors trying to build better lives. But the city also carries the weight of decades of crime, incarceration, and lost opportunities. And that is why the title of this documentary matters. From Streets to Prison is not simply about prison. It is about the road that leads there. Because prison is usually the final chapter. The real story begins long before the courtroom. It begins in neighborhoods, in families, in schools, in friendships, and in the choices people make when nobody is watching. For some, those choices lead toward opportunity. For others, they lead toward a prison cell. And understanding that difference may be the most important lesson Baltimore has to teach.